Thank you guys so much for coming back for another episode of Automobiles of Distinction. I'm Matthew Ivanhoe. This is a really special one for us today because behind me here we have what, in my humble opinion, is one of the greatest cars to come out of the country of Japan, the Honda NSX-R. Today, we're going to walk you through why this car is so special, and even more importantly, we're gonna show you on the road why this car is so special. When we talk about greatness of anything, we have to look at the way that a car is conceived, the way the car is born. We can't talk about the NSX-R without talking about the underlying car itself, because the underlying car is in and of itself very, very significant and very, very special. So Japan, to this point, till the NSX came along, had, in our opinion, and really in the opinion of a lot of the country's journalists, historians, etc., had never produced what would be categorized as a super sports category car. The country had produced plenty of sports cars in the past, but these were all cars that were built to a price point, that were built with a certain, with certain financial limitations, volume objectives, functional objectives that inherently limited what the cars were. But by the time the mid-'80s rolled around, the entire country was in the midst of what we now refer to as the Japanese bubble economy, when the country was experiencing unprecedented economic growth. There's a lot of money rolling around, and Honda set out to make a true flagship car, something that other manufacturers had never made prior to this. A scratch-built super sports category car. They really benchmarked Ferrari. From a performance perspective, at the time they initially benchmarked the 328 and then later the 348, with a very typical Japanese obsession on the details and on making this car perfect and reliable as well. That's part of the appeal of the NSX, was that it was a super sports category car that you could drive every single day, slam hundreds of thousands of miles on, and with regular maintenance, it would still keep working. It was a Honda at the end of the day. And this was something that was unprecedented in the car world. And so Honda used every last resource it had at its disposal to make this car the best. The focus was on making the car the most advanced and the most refined car they possibly could, and that began with weight. And so Honda developed the first production aluminum semi-monocoque, which saved a colossal amount of weight. It saved, over a comparable steel chassis car was in excess of 400 pounds weight savings. And that was just one little facet of the car. Everything down to the control arms were aluminum. The connecting rods were titanium. Everything down to the last gram was focused on, and this resulted in a car that was incredibly light, incredibly nimble. Also, the other thing that they had a real obsessive focus on, which was instilled in them by none other than Ayrton Senna, widely regarded as being the greatest Formula One driver of all time, who happened to drive a Honda-powered F1 car at that time. He instilled a focus on chassis rigidity as well. So not only was this car much lighter than its competitors, it was much more rigid than its competitors. And this produced a car that had legendary balance, performance. By the time the NSX was released, you had a car that set a new benchmark in the super sports category. And this from not just a manufacturer, but a country that had never done it before and managed to leapfrog the competition. So with that as a foundation, then we get into the R. You know, one of the most hallowed letters in the alphabet for car enthusiasts, but especially for Honda enthusiasts. The NSX-R already is based upon a car that is legendary and seminal, and not just Japanese cars, in the super sports category. So we're starting there. And then Honda takes this car and further focuses it. The standard NSX had a lot of creature comforts and a lot of things about it that made it very, very usable, very approachable, very easy. But Honda chose to produce something that was more focused, and focused they did. And we'll just go by the basic numbers. The basic numbers don't tell the whole story, but they tell a lot. So just for starters, they took 265 pounds out of a standard NSX. We'll just start there. That's a lot of weight. You know, when you look at what other manufacturers consider to be significant weight savings, when you talk about the weight savings on a GT Porsche, or final run out variants of various Ferraris, the 360 Challenge Stradale, the 430 Scud, the 599 GTO, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. When you look at the actual weight savings that occurs there on cars that frankly are much heavier, so therefore it's a smaller percentage of the car's overall weight, and then you look at this was a monster diet that this car was put on. You're nearly 10% weight savings. You feel that everywhere. So we'll start there. Then you get into the chassis, which again, the active and involved development of Senna comes into play here. The chassis was further refined and further stiffened to the effect of almost 50% improvement in chassis stiffness over the standard car. Well, that speaks for itself. And that also, much like the weight savings, translates into every aspect of the car's performance. Then you have the performance. So on paper, the car doesn't really pick up much horsepower. But then you butt up against what is known at the time as the Gentleman's Agreement, where all the manufacturers agreed to not produce vehicles that produce more than 276 horsepower. So in reality, the NSX-R produces a good deal more power than a standard car. In our observations, we found that it's to the tune of about 30, 40 more horsepower than a standard NSX of the same period. Then you get into the final drive ratio, which is shorter and in turn produces better acceleration. The suspension is completely re-engineered for improved high-speed handling, even everything down to the front and the difference in tire compound, front and rear, is thought through and re-engineered. Every single aspect of this car is thought through again. It's been categorically improved. Then we get into all of the significance of what this car is. So we're gonna just leave out the fact that, oh, by the way, the NSX was the first Honda vehicle to utilize VTEC. We'll leave that aside. The NSX-R is the first Type R vehicle from Honda. All those changes, the hardcore lightweighting that they engaged in, the improved power, the driver's focus, the singular driver's focus. This car doesn't have power steering. I mean, the steering is still the steering is just perfect. But all of that, this is the father of the ethos that created Type Rs. So you have what is already a very significant car made infinitely better with, and I'm not even going to get into the car's, motorsports pedigree. The very first Type R, and oh, by the way, less than 500 cars produced, 483 to be exact. So when you start looking at it versus other cars of this era, 964 RS, 993 RS, which by the way, this car, if you're an enthusiast of the old best motoring videos, you'll see that this car will put a hurt on either one of those. It makes such a compelling argument for the NSX in general, but especially the Type R. With how special these cars are, with how amazing they are to drive, with how rare they are, with what they represent. Every single time that an NSX-R rolls through these doors, we are beyond excited, and we could not be more excited to have this car here and to have more NSX-Rs rolling through the doors here in the future at Cultivated. We would like to thank you guys as always for coming by and checking out some of these cars that we're so privileged to handle here at Cultivated. Having this car here, one of the most significant cars of the 1990s, it's a privilege for us to be able to share these things with you. So don't forget to like and subscribe to be able to see more of the incredible cars that we have coming through here. Thank you so much for checking this video out, and until next time, we'll see you soon.